we live in a social media world where your success is based on impressions. Yep. How many likes, how many whatever. Yeah. Try to be someone that makes an impact. Because if you impact someone, you change the trajectory. By definition, you change the course of their path. And if you can impact people in a positive way, that will come back to you tenfold and may change their life. Amen. And so if I can, at some level, impact people through teaching or through internships at our company or through whatever, I'm all in for that. Because I wouldn't be where I was if people hadn't invested in me and given me opportunity. I'm fully aware of that.
Lonnie Hendry.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, dude.
Yeah.
It's an honor to have you in the podcast today.
I appreciate you bringing me on. I'm excited.
You got one of the biggest ones in the commercial real estate space. I mean, over 1 million listens, I think, right?
Yeah, so we're at about 270 episodes, 1.5 million listens.
Wow.
So it's been pretty cool ride so far.
And we haven't even really discussed this before, like, who came up with that? Was that your idea?
It wasn't my idea. It actually was born out of COVID. So like when everyone went into lockdown, we had internally talked about doing a podcast, but given the hustle of every day, it never really materialized. But then when everyone went home, and that was our life, it was like, let's start a podcast. So actually, I wasn't originally on the TreppWire podcast.
Okay.
We had a gentleman named Manus Clancy and Joe McBride and Martha Kocher that started it. And then I was on fairly frequently when they first started.
Yeah.
And then about 130 episodes in, I took over and I've been on there since. And so highlight of the week every week for sure.
That's super cool. Well, we've been connected for a little while. I think we really got introduced through our mutual friend, old Jared Harrell out there at lovely Lubbock, Texas.
Yes, sir.
Isn't that how it happened, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of people may or may not know this about you, but you're a professor out there as well.
Yes.
How often do you go out there again?
So it's interesting. So a little backstory on how Jared and I met.
Yeah.
When I was in grad school, his first semester as an adjunct, I was in his real estate law class.
Okay.
And so when I was in grad school, I was working full time, obviously, and trying to network and build some relationships outside of my day to day.
Right.
And so Jared and I became buddies. And so after I graduated, he was a lawyer in Fort Worth at the time.
Yeah.
We'd go grab lunch every so often or whatever. Fast forward, he leaves law, goes into real estate education at Texas Tech.
Yeah.
I was teaching at the community college here in Fort Worth at Tarrant County College.
Yeah.
Still do that. Been doing that since 2013.
Unbelievable.
And so Jared was like, hey, man, if you ever want to come teach some classes out in Lubbock, let me know. I was like, yeah, I'm down. And so 2018, I think I started teaching out there. Obviously, I live in Texas, but not in Lubbock.
Yeah.
And so at the time, I was down in Austin, and he was like, look, we can fly you out, teach a hybrid course. So we set up a class schedule that was like 5 on-campus classes a semester.
Okay.
And the rest of the class is asynchronous online.
Yeah.
And so we've been doing that since 2018, and it works. I think it works better than just traditional Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes because the kids aren't required to come to class 3 times a week. We meet enough where they know who I am. I know who they are. I get to impart what I know and learn from them.
Yeah.
But they're not, stuck to a rigid schedule, and they can do the online stuff at their pace. So it's worked out really well, and I enjoy it.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
One of these days, I think I would like to be a professor. I think it'd be just fun. I just think it's super cool how you guys just are helping shape, the future. I think that's super neat.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a fun endeavor in the sense that it keeps you connected to the younger generation.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to see where they have strengths and where there's opportunity for us to kind of impart some wisdom in them. So like they're clearly much more technologically advanced than I was.
I mean, you're way better on TikTok now because of teaching, right? Like, I mean, before that, TikTok game was not strong. Now, real strong.
Yeah, I mean, the dad jokes don't help, So like, and I got a face for radio, but it is cool to see just the evolution of education and how people learn, and then to your point, like a lot of them want to come into the CRE space. And given that I have 20 years experience in that space, it's really cool to kind of just talk to them about how they can make an impact. I mean, it's an industry that's relationship based, as you know.
Sure.
And kind of getting them comfortable with who they are, the value they add, the skills they have, what they can learn.
Yep.
Really cool feeling to be as a professor in that
No
realm.
doubt about it. No doubt about it. Well, before we dive into kind of your whole career and your journey in these 20 plus years of kind of the commercial real estate space, I always like to kind of talk a little bit about like your upbringing and kind of how that shaped you today. I think everybody listening to this can probably figure out that you and I are both Texans by our accent, right? Even though I never hear it, right? But I'm sure like you're living in New York all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
They got to just think, dude, who's this cowboy? Right?
It is like I used to be a little self-conscious about that when I first started going up there. And I went to, there's a really famous steakhouse in Manhattan called Keen's.
Yes.
And they have all the smoking pipes up on the ceiling. It's a historic place.
Yeah.
And I told the waitress, I said something about, do they have sweet tea? And she said, this isn't Texas. And I realized like, TSA is not checking that accent at the airport. Like it's coming with me.
That's right.
And I got to just embrace it.
Yeah,
and so
for sure.
It is funny. Like there's definitely a lot of people that kind of like, oh, you're from Texas. That's cool.
Right.
New York, it seems like awesome. We got to California, a little less like they don't love the Texas accent as much, but still haven't rocked the boots or the hat yet in New York. I need to do that.
Oh yeah. You gotta do that pretty soon. Yeah. Like I think the hat would be the greatest, right? Cause that's just, sadly, you don't see the hats even in Texas as much anymore, right? Like, I mean, I feel like you get a little bit of it when you go over to Fort Worth, right? But every time I see a guy, walking around the street in Dallas, like with a cowboy hat, I'm always just like, who's that? Who's that? Like, do I know that guy?
Yeah.
Because it's just not as prevalent in the big cities, folks. As much as you guys on the East Coast think we ride, horses to the office every day. But so tell me a little bit about it. Where'd you grow up, Lonnie?
Yeah, so I grew up here in the DFW area.
Yeah.
My parents moved here when I was little, 4 years old or so.
Okay.
And I was born in Missouri, but I'm a true Texan. I mean, I'm Texan through and through. And interesting, like, my dad moved here with my mom. He got a job. And we basically been in that North Richland Hills, Fort Worth, Keller area, like pretty much my entire life.
Right.
And, so I have a huge affinity for the DFW area, and I've seen it grow, obviously. And then, from the CRE perspective, like one of the top 5 places to work in CRE here in DFW. So
what what'd you want to be when you were a kid?
So I thought I was going to play second base for the Rangers.
Of course you did.
Yeah.
I love that.
So that I'd had a pretty good little high school career, and
did you?
Loved sports, played competitive and select baseball growing up, and we traveled all across the country. And as you know, like you just learn a lot about teamwork and camaraderie and putting in the work to see the results and all that stuff. Which, obviously those traits carry on into the professional world. So I was very fortunate to be part of some really good teams. We got to travel around, and my dad coached me all throughout, even through high school. It was really cool.
Wow.
And so, very fortunate. I've had an incredible upbringing. I wouldn't be where I am if I didn't have my parents that have invested so much in me and kind of shaped me into who I am.
I think it's, I had lunch yesterday with a gentleman, and he played college football. And, we talked all about just like how much sports really helps you in life.
Yeah.
I think some of it is like the competitive fire that is instilled in you. I mean, I don't know if as much today because everybody gets a trophy, unlike in our day, like you only got one if you're first place. But it's great because it just shows you, it shows you so much about how if you work hard at something, you can get really good at it and be at the top of your game.
Yep.
And the same thing applies to the commercial real estate world, to really any industry, right? If you put in the time and the effort and the energy, you'll be successful. And I just think that's why there's so many people with sports backgrounds that are leaders in this world of organizations, And so that's neat that you played a ton of baseball. Yeah, I thought the same thing. I thought I was going to be a pro NFL football kicker. that didn't quite work out for me either. You know, it's things happen.
Things happen.
Who was other than like your dad or so? It sounds like he was really involved. Was there anybody else that was really impactful?
I mean, I had great coaches coming up through, all of my sports leagues and even through high school, where people are really invested in me and want my success and try to lead me down the right path. But my dad, for sure. I mean, he's even now, like, we're best buds. I talk to him every single day.
That's awesome.
We're super tight, and it's just really amazing. Like, you don't appreciate your parents until you have your own kids and you see like the sacrifices and stuff that they made for you throughout your entire life that you just took for granted. And so, I felt like growing up, I was the oldest. Felt like I was fairly responsible. Tried to do right by my folks. But you don't realize just how much they give up to make you successful until you have your own. So it's I've been very fortunate, and I'm pumped that me and my parents especially have such a close relationship. I wouldn't be where I am without them, for sure.
So cool. It's so great to hear that. And, it's just the impact that a strong household can make on young people is it's real.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, let's dig into how we got to where we're at today, Lonnie. So you go to college.
Yeah.
And I think, if memory serves me correctly, you went to like UT Arlington, right?
Yes, I undergrad at Tarleton State.
Oh, Tarleton.
Yeah, Tarleton State. Then
now, were we on the rodeo team over there?
I wasn't tough enough for that.
Okay. All right. Just checking.
Yeah, I wasn't tough enough for that. But then did my graduate.
I like to say that my rodeo career lasted 15 seconds. That's 5 bulls times 3 seconds apiece.
I think I probably wouldn't have made it through the first couple bulls at 3 seconds apiece. But you got to know your limitations, right?
Yes, for sure.
That's not my thing. I love watching guys.
Yeah.
I wish I was tough enough to be a rodeo guy. But
like my kids love the rodeo. I still love taking them. If anybody's listening to this and you've never been to a rodeo, like, take your kids to the rodeo. Yeah. Like, it's such a, it's not just a Texan thing. Like, it's just an American thing.
Yeah, it's very cool.
And it's just cool to see these guys work these animals and the talent that they have. Anyhow, I digress. Tarleton, if you didn't know this, Tarleton is known probably as like the cowboy school of Texas.
Yeah, if you like Google Tarleton, the photo, the image of the school is like a guy on a horse.
Yeah,
so
for
it's
sure.
For sure, it's pretty intertwined.
Yeah, it's beautiful little country, right?
Oh, great! Yeah, it's incredible, and they have a really nice Fort Worth campus here in Fort Worth now, and they've seen some good expansion.
They sure do.
Part of the A&M system, all good stuff, and then did my master's at UT Arlington. That's where I met Jared.
And that's where you met Jared.
So, yeah.
So you started out, if memory serves me correctly, doing appraisal work, right? So tell me about that and kind of like how that came about.
Yeah, so like anything else, nobody grows up and like says, "Oh, I want to be like a commercial real estate broker or appraiser or whatever." Like I wanted to be the second baseman for the Rangers.
That's right.
I actually started off initially doing property management for multifamily. Like that was my first professional job.
Okay.
And I loved it. I still love it. Like I love multifamily. Worked for some local developers, bought land, entitled it, built properties, leased them up, sold them, moved on to the next one.
Yeah.
They ended up buying a couple of low-income housing tax credit properties, so I got to manage a couple of those. Got familiar with just how that process works in Texas. And so, as a young kid, I worked through college, so paid for my own school, worked full-time, went to school full-time.
Yeah.
And so I was working in multifamily while I was going to school, didn't really know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Transition, loved commercial real estate, got the bug, got into appraisal. I think appraisal is an underrated career path for people because it forces you to learn a lot about the industry and a lot about the fundamentals and what drives value. Like at some level, every transaction, whether it's development, sales,
has appraisal as part of it.
It's like, what's the value? If you don't know what the value is, you can't size a loan. If you don't know what the value is, you can't calculate an IRR. Like
that's right.
What's the value? And so appraisal for me was a really great way to kind of get my full grasp of the industry.
Yeah.
And that really kind of what led me towards the teaching stuff too. I was like, as an appraiser, you have to be well versed in market dynamics, fundamentals, supply and demand. It's all the stuff that's not just direct real estate.
Right.
And so you realize, like, if you're good at your job in the appraisal world, and there's limitations in the appraisal profession. Like, I'm not here advocating to like valuation is an exact science. Like the reality, especially in market times like we're having right now, when transactions dry up, when there's no availability of good information, it makes it really difficult. But
for sure,
broad brush, if you're in the appraisal profession, you take it serious, you can have a leg up in terms of what's taking place, boots on the ground across the submarkets. And
for sure,
it was a really great experience for me. And then did that for about 14 years and then transitioned over here to Trepp, where now I'm the chief product officer. So it's really interesting where I've gone from being a practitioner, and along the way I got my broker's license. I have a small brokerage business. Like I love the transaction part of it, all of that stuff. But now I have this really great gig where I get to work with people making a living doing deals, and I get to help them make more money and be more efficient, make better decisions with data, products, and platforms that we build. And it's really perfect. I love the dynamic. I still feel like I'm part of the CRE ecosystem, but in a way where I'm helping a bunch of different firms and people make their business better.
For sure. How did that opportunity at Trepp come available? I mean, really, like how does a New York company grab this cowboy from DFW? You're not a cowboy, but how did they get you, and like how did that roll, and how'd that come together? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I was actually a user of their tools.
Okay,
so that's how just organic. I started using their platform. And you know how it is, like when you're paying somebody for a subscription to something, you're like, oh, it'd be better if you could do this, and if you could do that, and can you build this?
Right.
And I think it finally got to a point where they're like, hey, man, like you have a bunch of ideas. Why don't you come help us build some stuff? And so they had a departure. Somebody left for a new opportunity. They reached out, and I'd actually spoken at one of their events as a client. And they recorded a testimonial of me, speaking about the platform and how it was really great for my job. And when they played it back for their internal teams, at the time the COO was like, "Who is that guy? Like we should reach out to him." And they're like, "Funny you say that. Like, he said he wants to come work here." And so it worked out. So I jumped on and
ladies and gentlemen, now he's got a C at the beginning of his name. I mean, he's in the C-suite. That's why he's on the show. Love it.
Yeah. So it's I don't take it for granted. Like it's a blessing to be part of a really great firm. It's a blessing to be able to impact our company and the profession in the way that I'm able to at Trepp. And the company it's incredible. It's an incredible place to be. We have very, very sharp folks, all goal-driven, ambitious, hardworking. And I think we have a really great fit in the market in terms of the value we add, the way we help people do their jobs better. And to be part of that is really cool.
That is cool. Let's dig into Trepp a little bit. Let's have a little infomercial, if you would. But tell everybody, there's probably been a lot of people that are in commercial real estate that have seen Trepp or the name, and it's probably because of your podcast and how popular it's been. But tell folks kind of what Trepp does, and there's going to be a ton of brokers here, owners, investors, all those guys listening to this thing, how it can help them.
Yeah, so I appreciate the opportunity. So I'm a walking billboard for Trepp. I mean, I believe very strongly in what we offer. So Trepp's actually a lot older than people realize. The company was founded in 1979.
Wow.
Back before there was CMBS as a consulting firm. And they did a lot of consulting work for financial services industry in New York. Fast forward to the 90s, BlackRock actually made an investment in Trepp. And it kind of coincided with the launch of the CMBS product as a security in the market. And there was a need for transparency as more and more people started trading CMBS bonds. They needed to know what the underlying collateral and the cash flows tied to those bonds were. And Trepp was written into the reporting structure for all of the CMBS deals.
Got it.
So that's really what cemented us as like a data provider and transitioned away from a consulting firm. So fast forward now in 2024, I mean, we have the largest repository of owner-submitted income and expense financial statements. And the way that works is if somebody takes out a CMBS loan or a Fannie Mae loan or Freddie Mac loan or CRE CLO loan, we're getting the data for the property at origination and then ongoing financial surveillance for all of those properties through the life of the loan. So a typical CMBS loan is 10 years. We'll get quarterly updated financials submitted directly from the owner, the borrower, to the lender, which comes to Trepp. And then we aggregate that information. So we have property level income and expense financial statement reporting.
Yep.
For all of the properties in those lending buckets.
Yep.
This last year in 2024 in January, we launched a new product called Trepp CRE, where we actually expanded our universe to include non-securitized, so non-CMBS properties.
Right.
We have over 4 million of those properties in our system now. And what we've done is we've taken the 30 plus years of historical financial data. We've built models off of that. And now you can click on any non-securitized property, and we're going to give you a line item income and expense pro forma based on owner submitted financials, so you get a directional proxy for value with no real work on your side. We have sales comps data, tenant data. We track top 5 tenants across all multi-tenant facilities, know who they are, how much space, when their lease expiration is.
Wow. This is office buildings,
industrial,
retail,
retail, and then obviously on the multi stuff, we have a really large swath of multifamily properties. And so, and then on top of all that, we have a really strong research team that puts out a bunch of commentary around the marketplace, data-driven commentary, not subjective, but we track delinquency, special servicing, all these stuff. And like Trepp's really grown into a source of transparency around the market. And so it's interesting. Like I went back last year, I was working with our marketing team. We were updating my professional bio. I did like 65 live presentations last year.
Wow.
Either through webinars or in person. And it just goes to speak, I'm not the only one that does that, obviously, at the firm, but like just kind of helps quantify people's respect for what we do. We're quoted in the Wall Street Journal and all the publications. Luckily, I was fortunate enough about 2 months ago to be on CNBC.
I saw that.
And just it's incredible. You know,
how
like
cool is that?
It's just awesome. Like it's,
I mean, other than the C-suite show, close second.
You know, it was one of those things where we had pitched an idea to them around some data that we were going to release, and we gave them an exclusive, and with the expectation that they would run a segment on it.
Yep.
So I was talking to the Diana Olick at CNBC and the producer, and they said, "Hey, can you cut like a segment real quick?" I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm in the finance bro vest.
Yeah,
like I hadn't like shaved or cleaned up in like 4 days, and I'm like, yeah, I'll do it, man. And so we recorded a little hit, and then they put it on the air, and it's pretty cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I saw that. I was like, wow.
Yeah,
that's really neat. So, a lot of loan data.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
yeah.
I mean, y'all are just tracking loans, maturity. So if you're, mainly a debt broker, like, boy, you need to be using Trepp.
100%. I would argue if you're in CRE, you should be using Trepp.
Yeah, for sure.
Our primary use cases are loan origination, capital markets, investment sales, valuation on the expense side. I mean, those line item expenses as an appraiser are almost impossible to come by.
Right.
We have that data. Tenant rep, landlord rep, we have all the information you need to be successful there.
Yeah,
I think
tracking tenants.
Yeah, where we're at now in the market cycle, as a tenant rep, traditionally over time, they were less concerned about the mortgage part of the equation and really just concerned about space, TIs, term.
Boy, if you're an office tenant
now you have a lot of leverage, and if your tenant rep knows that this property is facing foreclosure or delinquent or whatever, it changes the dynamic of those discussions. And so we've definitely found a nice little niche in that space where people can trust our data in maybe a use case where they maybe wouldn't have seen the full value.
Yep.
Now they're using our information in a way that makes them much more marketable.
Yeah. So, if there's a buzz in commercial real estate over the last year to 18 months, Lonnie, you know what's coming. 1.5 trillion in loan maturity, I think by the end of next year, right? Let's talk about that for a little bit. Some people say there's distress. Some people say a couple dozen banks are in trouble. Some say it's thousands. I don't know who to believe.
Yeah.
Right? I think we all know that a lot of the distress is in the office sector, some in multifamily, industrial and retail seem to be doing pretty well. depending, location driven, some of that stuff. What is it? Is it going to be bad? I mean, what are you seeing out there? Are these lenders just continuing to kind of kick the can down the road on these debt maturities because they don't want the property back, and they're hoping that these guys can find equity or a refi source? Or, I mean, what's happening out there? And I know you, and if you guys aren't listening to the TreppWire podcast, you need to, because he's talking about this stuff all the time, right? So I'd love for you to summarize a little bit about what you know and what's going on out
there. So this is definitely where we live. I mean, this is the data we track, and this is the talk track that we're on every week on our podcast and in our research and so forth. So I think there's a couple of things that, you have to have a foundational understanding and appreciation for. Headlines move a lot faster than distress.
Yep.
So there's a little bit of hyperbole at some level in terms of the sky is falling and everything's going to come crashing down, just because one of the things that creates intrinsic value for real estate is it's slow moving.
Yes.
It's not like the stock market where your emotions. It's not like the publicly traded REITs where investors can enter in the market and divest very quickly. Like, part of the value of real estate is that it's slow moving.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't move with emotion at a level that other investments do.
Yeah.
So is there distress? Yes. Is there going to be more distress? Yes. Is it going to get bad? Yes. If you own a building and you're in foreclosure and you lose the building, like, that's terrible.
Yep.
But it doesn't mean the building next door is going to see the same fate, right?
That's right.
And so I think there's some nuance to the discussion around there is factually a ton of maturities coming up. If you look at history, though, it's not unprecedented in terms of the number of and the volume of maturities. The challenge is just, this is the first time in a very long time where you have properties that were financed at a 3.5% interest rate that have to refinance at a 7%.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just math at that point.
That's right.
You're going to take a haircut on the value. There's going to have to be some new equity contributed, or you might sell out and your equity's wiped, but it doesn't mean the building's worth zero.
Yep.
And I think so. Like, there's a little hysteria around it.
Yep.
With that said, with COVID, with work from home, with all this stuff that's transitioned, like, people have definitely transitioned away from their historical perception of office.
Yep.
And unlike the big box retailers and unlike some of these other sectors that have faced similar paradigm shifts in terms of behavior, they had alternative adaptive reuses, or they had the ability to, take that big box retailer and subdivide it into 6 other retailers and actually make it worth more money.
Yeah, right.
In office, the highest and best use for a lot of these sites is just another office building. But right now, go try to convince somebody to say, I'm going to buy an office, tear it down, and build a new office.
Right.
It's a tough narrative, even though if you look at the office sector, there's a really strong bifurcation. The Class A new construction steel and glass buildings
are doing
killing
great.
it. Yeah,
killing it.
Like killing it. Like, it's absorption's crazy.
Is this even in New York City? Like,
those buildings are in a class of their own. You look at one Vanderbilt, you look at these other buildings, like, not seeing a challenge at all relative to historical norms or anything. In fact, some of those buildings have actually eclipsed prior rent records in terms of current rental rates.
Okay.
So, like, very strong on that end.
Yep.
It's the functionally obsolete Class B and C 1970s and 80s office buildings that are really challenged. And if you take an objective look, if you step back a little, those buildings were not great pre-COVID.
Right.
The institutional investment community loved CBD office.
That's right.
They wanted to get the safe returns. Those buildings were 95% occupied all the time.
Yep.
It was a good place to park money. There was good underlying fundamentals. But if you look at the assets themselves, they were tired before COVID.
Right.
And now what you have is you just have this move away from it. All those functionally obsolete components of the building are just much more magnified.
Yes.
And people are realizing when the building's only 70% occupied or 60% occupied, all those expenses that used to get passed back to the tenants, you now are absorbing that. And these become very capital intensive buildings. And with no real adaptive reuse, I mean, people talk about conversion to multifamily. Listen, like,
it's 20 to 30%.
I mean, I would even say less. Like, I think it's going to, like, I would say, I would probably support that thesis if you get super aggressive governments that do public-private partnerships, waive taxes, incentivize developers to make conversions. But without those types of things, it's going to be really hard to make.
Well, then you just have some that just, like you said, that just can't be converted. You got too deep of floor plates or lack of plumbing or whatever the case may be. It's too cost prohibitive. So there's some challenges ahead in the office sector. You know, Bob Knackle, who everybody knows in New York City, he's probably sold more than any of those buildings. And, you know, he's out there basically like, this is the best buying opportunity since the 1990s, you know, in New York City, you know, skyscrapers.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't disagree with him in the sense that I think as humans, we like collaboration, we like interaction, we like being around people.
Yeah.
If I'm taking the long game bet on this, I think in 5-10 years, maybe even sooner, people are just back in the office. I mean, like, I don't. Yeah. I definitely think there's going to be a certain percentage of jobs or people that just say, I'm not going to go back to the office. I don't want the commute. I don't want those things. And I think that's valid. But I also think this narrative that people are just never going back, at least at scale, I just don't think that's going to happen. I don't believe it. You know,
because I'm like you. I think collaboration, being around others. I mean, how do you work yourself up within the company promotion world if you're never in the office, right? I mean, but I do think there is certainly more of a demand towards, you know, labor is tight regardless of where you're at. And now, because labor is so tight, these people can demand, like, you better have a gym for me. I mean, the days of just having the little deli down in the basement, that doesn't work anymore.
Right. Yeah.
You know, you better have a nice gym. You better have some, you know, coffee high-end coffee bar, some access to restaurants, things of that nature. You're not getting people back to those offices.
I definitely think I'm actually surprised. I've said this a couple of times, and I'm hoping maybe somebody will do it and make me look smart. We've talked about the amenity wars in the office building, what you just outlined.
Yep.
I'm surprised more hotels haven't come in and started branding buildings under their flags. So you kind of have an expectation of what that user experience is going to be. It's like Four Seasons.
It's interesting.
Like, you go to a Four Seasons resort because you know what you're going to get and you're willing to pay. You go to St. Regis because you know what you're going to get and you're willing to pay. Why haven't they?
That is a very interesting concept.
You know, why haven't we come up with some sort of a hybrid? It's still an office, but it's run and it's built.
It's
operated by these
the Ritz-Carlton.
Exactly. Like, that's a different experience that I think brings people back beyond just the amenities at face value. It's the experience. And if you can get people that experience where they feel like the office is more than just a place that they have to go for work, I think it changes people's impetus to go back to the office. And so I don't know how that would work from a fee perspective or how you structure that, but you know, all these offices are professionally managed as is.
I think you should start the WeWork of this generation of doing hotel branded office buildings.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like,
no, it does.
I know.
You know what he did.
You know what you're gonna get when you go to a Courtyard, right?
Right.
Like, you're getting good value for the money.
That's right.
You're not going to be disappointed. They're going to be generally the same.
Yeah.
On the high end stuff, though, you're willing to pay a premium for that, and I think. So it'll be interesting to see if you see a dynamic shift.
I mean, even in my, you know, I'm here in the Galleria, and these were built in the 80s, and I mean, the amount of money that Piedmont has been pouring into this building. I mean, dude, there's a Topgolf simulator down in the lobby now, you know, and I mean, fancy coffee bars, and you know, every inch of this place is being redone right now, and but boy, you know, their occupancy here is high. Yeah. You know, and so they're winning deals, and you got to do that if you're an office guy. So, how many banks are in trouble?
So this one is a little trickier in the sense that if you just look at the numbers, there's a lot, and if you just look at the data, you would probably be a little bit nervous around just the sector as a whole.
Yeah.
But I think we all know in life, like, life is more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's more than just black and white in terms of context. Like, you have to have the bigger picture. And the reality is the banking system is so integral to everything that we do.
For sure.
There's going to be backstops that are going to be put in place. There's going to be things to make sure the system as a whole stay intact. Yeah. And so I would suggest you're going to see a lot more M&A activity. You're going to see some banks struggling that get non-traditional investment from folks, and we just saw that with Fortress and Canyon Partners made a sizable investment in a bank that needed to fundraise. You're going to see some dynamic shifts in that sector. But I think these people that are thinking the sector as a whole or thousands of banks are going to go under, like, I just don't think we'll see that at scale, because like if you actually look, you walk into any bank, you see the FDIC, right? It says backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. Like the system is built on faith and people understanding that the government,
and we could just keep printing money.
Well, I mean, I'm not suggesting there's not downstream implications. But the reality is, like, I think it's just one of those things that we have to come to some reality that the too big to fail, initially was applied to a couple of banks. Now you can almost argue the sector is getting that same type of treatment. And I think you're going to see the big boys buy up a lot. You've already seen some of that. You're going to see a lot more of that. And is that good or bad? Like, I think you could argue both. Like, if the bigger banks have more footprint across the U.S., then maybe that's a good thing. Regional and community banks, though, are a very important part of regional activity, especially on the CRE side. I mean, much more relationship driven, much more track record focused. Like, for CRE, regional and community banks are a huge part of the equation. Having less of them, to me, is not a great thing. But at the same time, if you bank with a smaller institution, it's just amazing how far behind they are in some of the technology and the access to your money and the way they hold some of your funds. Like, it's a nuanced part of the system that I think we're going to see some change. But I'm not one that's thinking like you're going to see mass hysteria in the banking space.
Well, that's good to hear. Because I don't think we want another GFC.
No, I mean, that's the one benefit that we've seen through this disruption is there's still been availability of capital. There's still been availability of funds.
Deals are still happening.
You're still seeing transactions. Where, like, if you go back to the GFC, like, nothing got done.
That's right.
Nobody could get a loan.
I mean, transactions are down 40, 50% roughly. But deals are still happening. And capital just costs a lot more. But I agree. I don't think it's going to be like a global meltdown like we had in 2008 and 2009. I think it's going to be isolated towards office, Yeah,
I mean, I think that's an interesting point. Not all banks' portfolios look the same.
100%.
So if you're sitting on a heavily concentrated office CRE portfolio,
that's right.
That's bad.
Those are going to be
the ones that are higher risk, right? The banks that manage those risks prudently on the front end before this disruption, that had just an equal weight of multifamily, office, industrial, they're diversified.
That's right.
They're going to take some losses. They're going to write some bad loans off, but they're not going to be in a position where their entire portfolio sinks.
I know. That's the biggest thing. Is sometimes I see all these reports and I'm like, and they name the banks and how much exposure they have, of debt maturing in the next year and all that. And I'm like, well, that's great, but how much of that debt is office, industrial, retail, multifamily, right? That is really going to be the ultimate.
I think the one thing that's interesting, and I would like to, hear other people's perspectives. So if you're listening to this and you want to reach out to me or Conrad and share your thoughts, love to have it. But going back to the valuation question, like right now, a lot of metrics are based off of loan to value. But the value is static as of, whatever date. They do get updated appraisals, but only when forced, when the property becomes non-performing. There's got to be a better way to get a mark-to-market proxy. I'm not suggesting you would mark-to-market daily, weekly, monthly, something like that. But, these large funds are doing valuations quarterly or annually at a minimum. In the banking space, there probably should be some innovation in that regard where you have a more real-time perspective of, like, what is your loan to value or loan to cost or, whatever metric you want to look at in a more realistic time frame. Because a lot, like to your point, a lot of these properties, multifamily or the industrial, those values may have gone up significantly from when the loan was made.
That's right.
So it's it's a counterweight to the negative,
Yeah. There's something smart I was going to say in just a second ago now. I've completely forgot about it. But anyhow, I digress. It sucks getting old, Lonnie, doesn't it?
I'm living it, man.
So let's pop over to lovely. Oh, I know what I was going to talk about. The biggest thing about commercial real estate, what we need in any time is just stability.
Yeah.
Right? Like in 22, when we just had monthly rate hikes, nothing could get done because nobody knew what values were.
Right.
It literally was changing daily, weekly, oh, well, now I need to solve for X. Now, it was just wild. So now at least this year, we've kind of had some stability. Like people know what they got to underwrite to
right.
get deals happen. But the biggest thing, I think what a lot of people are waiting on is when are the interest rates going to get cut? Now, you and I aren't inside the Fed. I think they've been teasing us a lot at the beginning. Everybody I think was thinking, oh, there's going to be 3 or 4 this year. I don't see that happening. I think it's going to be 1.
Yeah.
I think if we're extremely lucky, it might be 2, but probably 1. You talk to a lot of people in the financial services area. Where do they think interest rates are going?
Yeah.
And how is that going to affect our industry?
This is an interesting question in the sense that in my real estate classes, I teach the students about this concept in CRE called a psychological stigma. Mm-hmm. And usually it's referred to like at a property level where if something really bad happened at that property, some buyers might be scared away from it because of a psychological reason. Like there's nothing wrong with the building.
Right.
Tenants are still paying rent, but just being associated with that psychologically is a barrier for them.
Yep.
And I think there's some of that in today's market when it comes to interest rates, where if you look at historical norms, we're not outside the norm even right now. Like we're on the higher end of a historical norm from an interest rate perspective.
Yep.
But we're not outside the range.
No.
The part that was outside the range was the last 5 years when we were like at zero interest rate and the markets just went crazy.
Yeah.
So there's a psychological stigma now where like we have to have an interest rate cut. Well, if you get 125 basis point rate cut, it doesn't change the math.
No.
If you're at 4% and you're refining into a 7 or a 6 3/4, no difference. Like it's still going up from 4 to 6 3/4.
That's right.
Still a net negative for you.
That's right.
So there'll be some psychological boost maybe if we get an interest rate cut or two where people think, oh, the Fed's done and we're coming back down.
Yeah.
But I think any long-term perspective of like interest rates coming back anywhere close to where they were 5 years ago, I think is just off the table. Like I would suggest you might see over the next year or two 100, 150 basis point reduction in rate if they need to stimulate the market. But if you look at where we're at right now, inflation, like I know they measure inflation, they say it's coming down and it's almost in the target range. Go buy some groceries, go buy some gas. Inflation is baked in, and it's a lot worse than people think.
The other day, my wife's got a bag of for 4th of July, Lay's or Fritos, right? Now, this is the big one.
Yeah.
Dude, it was $7.39 on the bag for Fritos. And for me, and a lot of, it doesn't hurt me.
Yeah.
But a lot of Americans, dude.
They're going without Fritos.
They're going without Fritos.
Yeah, it's...
it just seems like that bag of Fritos was $2 to $3 for my entire life.
Yeah.
And I literally was just like, what? $7? It's the old school stamp on there, It's been on that Fritos bag for eternity.
They had to order a new press for that.
They totally did. They're like, hold on, we got to change a number at the front? Call the guy in the bag. Like, it's been 20 years since we've changed it, And he had to get up there and chisel out and put a new stamp in there. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
But yes, so prices are expensive. Meat, groceries, gas, all those things, I don't believe they've come down.
Look,
what's come down?
Yeah, that's the question. We've talked about it a lot on our podcast is like, it's 2024 and we're still looking at metrics that were derived and calculated and used as economic indicators 50 years ago.
Right.
There's got to be a better way to get real-time insight into like where the market is.
Sure.
And there's got to be better proxies for like measuring some of these things than what we're currently using.
Yes.
And in every instance, whether it's a jobs report, whether it's unemployment, whether it's whatever, they're always revised after the fact anyways. Nobody ever pays attention to the revision or the revised numbers. So I'm a simpleton. I like CRE. It's like buy, sell, trade,
yes.
Lease, own, whatever.
Yeah.
I kind of look at the transaction market to say, like, where are we at? And to your point, there's still activity.
Yeah.
We're down 40% from the peak or whatever the number is.
Yeah.
So the markets are feeling the pain because we're not seeing the activity.
Yeah.
I think that's a better marker for where we're at than some of these other, BLS statistics and other things.
Yeah. If you're going to invest in commercial real estate today, Lonnie, where are you investing?
It's a great question. I think the de facto answer for most would be industrial, just because it's been the darling coming out of COVID.
Yeah.
And I think in most markets, there's still an outpace of demand relative to supply, but I think you're starting to see a lot of that abate a little bit, especially on the spec space, larger industrial, not as much leasing activity, certain pockets starting to slow down.
Yep.
Data centers are very interesting. You and I talked a little bit about that before we started. Like, there's an insatiable need for that at the moment that I think probably looking out 15, 20 years, like, you're going to see a lot more data center activity. So, like, I think there's some good opportunity there. I'm probably at my core, though, I'm a multifamily guy. Like, I'm a multifamily person. I think
when you got growing population.
That's the deal. I mean, like, if you just look at the drivers of what makes a property successful, multifamily is the most resilient. Like, you have population growth, especially in states where you have net in-migration and people moving there.
Yep.
They're going to need a place to stay. There's a huge divide between cost of home ownership and renting, even though rental rates are up significantly cheaper, some multiple cheaper in a lot of markets than it is owning a house.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty bullish on the multifamily sector.
It's interesting. We talked about it a little bit earlier about some of the guests that have come on, but Michael Levy was on here the other day, and I asked, hey, what are y'all bullish at Crow about investing in? And he obviously mentioned industrial because that's kind of their background and all those other things that you mentioned, but he mobile home parks.
Yeah.
Right. And that's probably an area that it's not sexy.
Yeah.
And it's maybe a little bit overlooked, but when you kind of go back to the point of what we were talking about, inflation, how much things cost now, and there's so much need for housing, so I think mobile home parks are also going to be an incredible investment over time.
Yeah. So we track mobile home parks.
Do you really?
We do. We have a lot of income and expense data on mobile home parks.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, the amount of issuance for mobile home parks in the last 5 years is up significantly.
Yeah.
Double-digit type growth in terms of investors moving into that space.
Such a low barrier to entry.
Low barrier to entry. And if it's one of those where if you can get market share.
I mean, would you rather own a mobile home park or this office building?
Yeah, for sure. Like, now there's some challenges obviously with there's a lot more management day to day, month to month, and collecting rent, making sure things are working properly. A lot of them are in rural areas where there's other challenges. But yeah, I agree with you. Like, I think mobile home parks they're kind of the last bastion of affordable housing.
Yes.
And you're going to see people moving into that from an investment perspective. The fundamentals are just like multifamily.
That's right.
And they effectively operate like multifamily.
Yes.
And so I definitely think there's an increased appetite for that. It's interesting. Self-storage kind of was in the same place maybe 4 years ago where everyone was like, wow, this is kind of a recession-resistant investment, fairly low management expense and maintenance. We can automate a lot of this and do it virtual. And we saw a huge influx of people into self-storage.
Yeah.
Seen a little bit of pullback there, though, because that low barrier to entry means there's low barrier to entry, right?
That's right.
And especially like in Texas here.
Yeah.
You want to open a mobile home park, I mean, there's not a whole lot that goes into doing that if you're outside of town.
Right.
And so, the office building or some of these other markets, they had those higher barriers to entry.
Yeah.
Sustain value.
Yep.
Because not anyone can come and just build another Class A office in downtown without going through the process.
Yeah.
Whereas there's some risk on some of those other. But I agree. Like, I think there's synergies there. it's interesting. We've seen it even on the build to rent. A
lot of that's
where I think people are trying to say, how can we replicate the same type of predictable income that we get in multifamily, but maybe in a non-traditional way? Mobile home parks being one, build to rent neighborhoods being another. I'm pretty bullish on the build to rent side. I think if they can figure out a way to manage expenses on par with traditional
the other thing they're doing is like these tiny homes, right? Because homes are so expensive now. They're building 1,000 square foot homes. And that's just a segment that, again, because of the affordability, like people got to have a roof to sleep under.
And as a builder, you can get you provide a house that's 1,000 square feet. Maybe in Texas, that's probably 60% of the typical square footage. But you can get 75% of the price.
Right.
So
it's like leasing little bitty warehouses, right? Where those little 1,500 square foot spaces, you're just like, oh, well, I can charge him $2,000 a month, and then you're like, my God, he's paying $25 a square foot in there,
exactly,
right? But they'll pay it.
They'll pay it because, to your point, it's like it's what they can afford. And then on the development side, you can, in a 100-acre subdivision, when the houses are only 30 foot wide.
Right.
Because you're building 1,000 square foot house as a single car garage, you can stack them in there. And so the economy of scale for the developer on those is really remarkable. It'll be interesting to see just if people finally start pushing back and maybe saying I'm not going to pay 75% of the cost for 50% of the utility. But I don't think we're there yet. I mean, I think people are they want to own something. They want to get a place of their own. They're going to just keep paying, and the developers are going to keep building.
Yeah. For sure. Well, I think we covered most of the commercial real estate world, right?
Is
there anything we didn't cover that you want to touch on at all?
I mean, I think amongst the headlines and the challenges the industry is facing, which are real and they're documented. People underestimate how resilient the market is. And people underestimate what a great asset class commercial real estate is on the whole.
For sure.
And I think when we came out of the great financial crisis, we basically went on a 10-year bull run plus where we saw no downturn.
And
the first thing,
free money.
Free money. And those two things in conjunction were just not great. I mean, logic tells us that if you're buying a multifamily property that's 1970s vintage and you're going in cap rate on trailing 12-month NOIs in the threes,
right?
There's not that doesn't work. I know that's maybe my old school mentality.
Right.
Cap rates on a Class A in 2006.
Well, I want a 10 cap more, bro.
It's 10
it's cap plus
7%, 6%. Now we're talking these people buying assets on a 3 on trailing 12 with the assumption they're going to push rents 15%. They're going to reduce expenses.
I know.
There's just something fundamentally challenging about that. Now, and I think even today, one thing that maybe gives me a little pause is on the multifamily side in particular, you haven't seen expansion of cap rates with the expansion of interest rates.
Right.
And I'm the first to say, I don't think interest rates and cap rates are directly correlated, but there should be some correlation.
For sure.
And in markets like Dallas, Austin, in San Diego, and in Miami, you're not seeing any cap rate expansion. So these deals day one are going in negative leverage.
That's right.
We've seen real pullback on the rent growth side. We've seen huge cost increase on the expense side.
I
don't know where they think they're going to get the value at. And if you're banking on a 10-year hold and getting it all in reversion, I'm nervous about that, right? I don't know what's going to happen 10 minutes from now, let alone 10 years from now. One thing we didn't touch on that might be of interest is the expense acceleration on the CRE side. Insurance, property insurance.
Big time.
Huge problem. And not getting enough attention, not enough people talking about it. You have...
for my entire career in industrial, we would always underwrite between $1 to $1.50 a square foot for any kind of bulk warehouse type deal. Now you're lucky if it's $2. And it's usually closer to almost $2.50 sometimes now. So that's double.
It's usually for less coverage. Or there's more strict compliance, or there's other requirements.
Well, and I'm hearing in Florida, those guys insurance, they're not even getting insurance.
So I think that's one potential systemic problem we have.
Yep.
Where if you look at New York as an example, they passed a rent stabilization law a few years ago for multifamily. So we've done a lot of research. We had a client symposium up in our offices a few months ago, and we had a gentleman named Jay Martin come on. He's an advocate for a community housing improvement program, basically all the rent stabilized apartment owners in the New York area. And he was just highlighting how, because the rental rates have been capped, the expenses obviously have not, that a lot of these apartment owners are going without insurance. Now, it's against the loan covenants. The lender wants them to have insurance for obvious reasons.
Yep.
But the same thing's happening in Florida at some level where people can't afford. They're trying to self-insure. They're trying to come up with some alternative ways to insure their assets. But imagine if you have a critical mass of properties in a certain region that don't have insurance, and one of these tropical storms or hurricanes or something comes through, and the bank's left holding the paper on something that doesn't exist anymore, and there's no way to rebuild it because the owner didn't have a policy in place. That could be problematic. So I think my guess is we'll probably see some intervention. The government will come in and kind of stabilize the market at some level just to make sure that doesn't happen. And I don't think we're there yet.
How does the lender even let that happen?
I think it's like anything else, like especially right now, if you're a bank and you're under scrutiny, obviously that is part of your active management.
Right. But I guess
just like anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, like, are you effectively checking every single certification, getting your stuff on every property, and are the property owners submitting valid?
Right.
There's just a lot to that.
Yeah.
And I think the market's resilient. That would be my close. It's just like CRE is going to survive. The first thing we learn in commercial real estate classes in college is it's a cyclical business.
It is.
For a lot of people, this is their first cycle.
100%. There's been a lot of fat trimmed in our industry over the last 2 years. Sadly, and a lot of investment salespeople, right? Yeah. Where they just were like, oh, I can just sell, everybody was selling and doing. And while by the time you gave them your BOV to the time you took it to market, the cap rate had even fallen more, it was just crazy. And deals were easy, and now it's hard.
Yeah, now it's that relationship, that network, the dynamic of being able to work a deal is what it takes at this point. Like, you can't just, go from LOI to getting a deal closed and cashing the check. At this point, like, you're working every angle and you're making sure that everyone's doing their job.
You got to actually create value.
You have to add value, and the good thing is for the folks that survive this, when the market swings back the other way, and they're going to be killing it,
That's right.
And so for those that are in that production role where the market is down and is causing problems, like, stick with it. If you can build a system and you can add value, the people will always pay you for the value you add. I'm a firm believer in that.
I got in the business right after 9/11, which was just bad.
Yeah.
But I always tell people, like, if you're young in the business, you want to get in when the market's not frothy. Yeah. Because if you get in when it's frothy, you're missing everything.
It's tough. It's tough to learn how to build your business.
That's right. And so now you build that business over the next couple of years, and then when it really starts taking off again, which it will, because we've seen this song and dance plenty of times, you'll be timing it perfect.
Agreed.
Well, let's jump in. We're going to do some C-suite closers, as I like to say, and we'll keep this quick and get you out of here. I appreciate all the insights so much so far. What is something most people don't know about you, Lonnie Hendry?
So I'll say two things.
Okay.
I'm a junior, so me and my dad have the same name, and I have a son that has my name, so he's the third.
Nice.
We call him Trepp.
Good.
So that's kind of cool.
Not Trepp, but Trepp.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Trust me, on multiple calls, I've gone between Trepp and Trepp interchangeably.
That's funny.
The other thing is I'm a drag racer. So
really?
I race old muscle cars.
Do you really?
So I have two 1968 Dodge Darts, big block Mopars, and do straight line 8th mile drag racing. Me and my dad, something I've been doing since I was a kid. So
you're like a grease monkey. Like, you like getting in there.
I love it. Like, we have a lift at a shop. We do all of our own stuff. And Big enclosed trailer. We go all across the country. We
Do you
race.
really?
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, love it.
That's so cool.
So do big wheelies in the car.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
so like Ennis kind of
Ennis is there. We race at Ennis.
Is that like the biggest one here in DFW?
It is.
Yeah.
There's another one not too far from there in Ferris.
Okay.
10 minutes from Ennis.
Yeah.
It's called Extreme Raceway Park. Really nice facility.
Okay.
We do a lot of racing in Wichita Falls.
Okay.
We race up in Ardmore, Oklahoma, and Noble, Oklahoma, and Prescott, Arkansas, and Missouri. We race all over the place.
So when I get my Dukes of Hazzard Dodge Charger, I know who to take it to.
Yeah, man. We'll
to tweak that engine.
My daddy's a master. Like that's what he does.
That's what he does.
That's like by
Just
trade. He's a mechanic.
Maximizing the horsepower.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. It's great for me because like my dad does that for a living,
right?
And so I'm not paying full freight for that,
for sure.
And it's really cool because it's something we've done forever. Like first time I drag raced a car I was 15, and I was up with my granddad in Missouri, and did a quarter mile.
Yep.
And over 100 miles an hour as a 15-year-old. And at that point, it's like I'm hooked for life. It's.
I mean, that is some adrenaline right there.
Yeah.
What's the fastest you've ever gone in a car?
135 miles an hour, 137 miles an hour in a quarter mile.
Quarter mile, yeah, that's moving.
So that's like 9.5, 10 seconds.
Yes.
So 0 to 135.
That's fast.
It's amazing. It's incredible.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago, I was really close on. I've always wanted 2 cars in my life. Like I love cars too. Probably not to the level you do, but I love cars. And as a kid growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, like, I mean, Dukes of Hazzard was like Bo and Luke Duke, dude. That was the coolest thing ever, right? So I've always kind of liked the Dodge Charger. But then I love Smokey and the Bandit, and I almost pulled the trigger on a Smokey and the Bandit the other day, but they got a deposit on it before I could get to it.
Yeah, that's frustrating.
And I was like, dude, this one had been juiced up to like 600 horsepower. I was like, that's the one I want.
Yeah.
You know,
I will say it's an expensive hobby.
Oh, I'm sure.
So I'm looking for sponsors. If anyone listening to this wants to throw some money at something that doesn't make a whole lot of money,
right?
I'm happy to take some money. We'll talk about putting a sticker on the car. But yeah,
that's so great.
Love it, man.
What you teach young people all the time. What, and I'm sure you share stuff like this. What do you give them? Books they should read. What do you love?
I like Malcolm Gladwell. I like Simon Sinek. I think both those guys do a good job of kind of getting people in the right mindset around how to view your value, how to view your role, especially as you grow into leadership. There's a book by Charles Duhigg called The Power of Habit, which I think is pretty impactful.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
And I love reading. If you're not intellectually curious your entire life, you're missing out.
Yes.
Like I've learned through, my 42 years, I guess, of like, I have a very limited understanding of the world. Like I see the world through my lens, through what I've lived and experienced.
Sure.
It's way better when you expand and you start learning from others and how they've experienced life in the world. And the reading is an easy way to do that. Yes. But also just being open in every dynamic. Like
totally,
you have a chance to meet somebody, learn a little bit about them, invest in them. They'll give you back way more than you ever expected. And
100%.
You'll become a much more well-rounded person if you do that.
Yeah. I think reading's so critical. Like, I think so much of the stuff that I've learned is in self-taught is through reading books.
Yeah.
Tell me about the Spotify playlist. What do you got on there?
So I'm an interesting music head. Like I like 90s rap, but I love like
are we
Texas.
doing like some Dr. Dre?
Oh yeah.
Snoop Dogg.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh,
yeah.
Gin and juice.
Yeah, yes. All that. And then on the flip side is like Red Dirt Texas country, like acoustic, raspy voice, smoky bar. Love it.
Yes.
So I love music. Like I have music playing all the time.
Yes.
All
right, give me your top 3 Texas music guys that you're listening to. Who do you love the best?
Okay, so kind of off the beaten path. There's Jared Morris.
I have not heard of this one.
So he's like super authentic.
Okay.
So I'm into that. I like the Zach Bryan stuff, although he's a little more mainstream now.
Yeah.
But like when he first started, I was into that. Still a huge fan of like Cody Canada.
Yeah.
And The Departed was the Cross Canadian Ragweed guys, even though they're Oklahoma guys.
So good.
Into that. So that kind of genre is, I really like, if I've bought like 5 guitars in my life, maybe 3 or 4.
Have
maybe
you really?
5. I want to learn to play guitar. I can't sing. I'm not artistic. Like I could disfigure, stick figure. Can't draw, paint, anything.
Yeah.
I want to learn to play guitar so bad.
Yeah.
My brain just does not know how to make that happen. Like I just cannot take seeing something. I just can't do it. I just can't do it.
I can't either. Like I think you're born with an ear for music. I love music.
Yes.
I love going to shows.
Yeah.
But I have no musical talent.
Yeah.
My daughter, who's 9, I mean, she plays the piano. She's got a guitar. She's self-teaching herself on the guitar. And I'm just like, what? Like how?
Yeah. One of these days when I like am old and semi-retired, I'm going to like force myself to like hire a professional guitar teacher and have someone teach me how to play guitar.
Yeah, that would be fun, man. If you look back, like if you could play guitar like in college, like the chicks, like that's such a young guys. If you're listening to this, learn how to go play guitar because
definitely gives you some advantages.
It definitely.
I was like reading investment books at Barnes and Noble on Friday night. Like I was too nerdy for that cool stuff.
A couple months, you'll love this if you love Texas country and all that stuff. A couple months ago, Robert Earl opened for Willie, and I took my whole family, and like it was so much fun. Yeah, so great.
I saw him at Billy Bob's probably 15 years ago.
Did you?
And sat like center stage, front row.
So great,
awesome, man! Like Texas legend. But it's funny. My coworkers in New York the other day, I was talking about Robert Earl Keen. They had no idea who that was.
But they're like, who? What?
So one of these days, I don't have to be blasted. I'll blast that when I walk in the office and give them a little education.
The road goes on forever.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
If you could have coffee with one historical or famous figure, other than Jesus, because too many people answered Jesus, so I'm changing it up on people. Who would you choose?
I probably don't. I don't have someone like just off the top of my head here. Like I don't know. I mean, sitting in your office here. I mean, Tom Landry stuff is everywhere. That would be a really cool choice. I think
for sure.
I mean, there's. I have a. If I put
you're
some thought into
baseball guy, so I'm. Nolan Ryan.
Maybe? Oh yeah, I was huge Nolan Ryan fan.
Had to be huge
posters on the wall everywhere.
There's Nolan up there after he
knocked out Robin
Ventura. A good one.
Yeah, Nolan would be a good one, and I think he would be interesting because he's kind of married like the professional career to like a profitable like business career. Roger Staubach would be another one with the real estate tie-in. Like those would be very cool.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, like just living in the world we do now. It almost feels like you have access to a lot of people through social media and other things, or you get kind of a window into their mindset without actually having to meet them.
Yeah.
I should probably put some more thought into that just practically, but I like working all the time. Like I'm like trying to get to the next day and kill it, But sorry, I don't have a great answer for you.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good, Lonnie. Last thing, you're impacting a lot of kids because you're a professor, but are there any other like give back or charities that you're passionate about that you'd like to mention? Yeah,
so I mean, obviously through my faith, give money and stuff there to try to help impact our local communities.
Sure.
I'm on a couple of boards, mostly real estate focused, but I'm on the Fordham University Real Estate Institute Advisory Council.
Okay.
Same with Texas Tech. Not charitable directly, but really trying to move the needle to empower maybe underprivileged or folks that wouldn't have an opportunity to have access to great education.
Yep.
Getting their foot in the door, getting to meet people from the industry that they might not otherwise cross paths with. And so, I think as I continue to evolve in my life and kind of hit milestones and go, like, obviously I'm going to do everything I can to give back.
Well, access to education is one of them, I mean, we know a young man, Roque, who, was just an absolute stud at Texas Tech in their real estate department. And, he's one of those cases of, found the right avenues and got on scholarship, and, he's first college graduate in his class, and now his house, and, now he's living in Dallas Fort Worth working for a big shop.
And that resonates with me. Like neither of my parents graduated college. I was the first one in my family to go. I put myself through school. But seeing how hard my dad worked, the work ethic, all the stuff that he did to provide for us, like, how was I going to complain or not finish? Like, I was just going to do that. And it's really served me well. And so if I can impart some of that into some of my students or others that I run across, like, this world will reward you if you work hard.
Amen.
And if like I said, if you're intellectually curious, people are generous with their time if you just ask and bring some value. If you genuinely want to learn, I'm convinced people will always plug in and share their knowledge, their time, whatever.
No doubt about it.
If you do it from, we had a discussion at our office. We had these Tuesday morning meetings and updates, and I presented one a year or two ago where I said, there's a difference between, we live in a social media world where your success is based on impressions. How many likes, how many whatever. Try to be someone that makes an impact. Because if you impact someone, you change the trajectory. By definition, you change the course of their path. And if you can impact people in a positive way, that will come back to you tenfold and may change their life. Amen. And so if I can, at some level, impact people through teaching or through internships at our company or through whatever, I'm all in for that, because I wouldn't be where I was if people hadn't invested in me and given me opportunity. I'm fully aware of that.
Yeah, for sure. One of my favorite hashtags I use a lot is make an impact.
For sure.
And whether that's, somebody you just come across today, or just maybe opening the door for the old lady that's crossing, coming in the office building, just if you do good things every day, it'll come back to you in spades for sure. Lonnie, where can people find you? You're extremely active on LinkedIn. And we'll have all this linked in the show notes and all the other good stuff. But is that the best way to?
LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter or X, Lonnie_CRE. Happy to connect. We can put my email stuff out there if people want to email.
I'll put that in
whatever I can do. Again, if there's speaking opportunities or things that I can do to help people, if they want to see our product, whatever, like I'm available. Definitely try to make sure I create time. And then the podcast for us, like the TreppWire podcast, one of the biggest benefits for me of doing that is the college folks that reach out because their professor or someone said, you should check this podcast out. Because we try to bring an educational component to that show.
For sure.
So the messages on Twitter or on LinkedIn where people are like, hey, I'm a junior and I'm trying to get into CRE. And, at this point, like, I have a pretty diverse network of people that I know. And it's been really cool to kind of help people get their foot in the door in a way that they might not have otherwise been able to. And so, if people want to reach out, if there's anything I can do to help, I'm game.
That's so awesome. I mean, I do the same thing, Lonnie. I tell people all the time, like, if you just reach out to me and like, if you take that initiative, you're already 10 steps ahead of your competitors in college. And, I'll get you on the calendar and I'll tell you, I'm as straight shooter as you'll ever meet. And I'll tell you how you need to get what I think from point A to point B, but, somebody gave me time 25 years ago, right, to change my life, to get me in this industry. And so that's one of the ways I try to give back is helping others.
Love it.
So, brother, this was fun, man.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks for coming over today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.